Hey, like, share, and subscribe. The WrestleMania where the world stood still. I love that line. This is my review of the documentary WWE 24. The show must go on. This is where they talk about the coronavirus WrestleMania, the pandemic mania, the empty arena mania, and the performance center. There was a lot of mini documentaries involved in this. You know, Rhea Ripley, Braun Strowman, Drew McIntyre, and Kevin Owens. They all, basically told their short career stories, how they came to the WWE and their WrestleMania memories and wrestling memories. I'm not going to go through all that stuff. Everybody knows why anybody watched this documentary. If you saw the clip online, you know why anybody would watch this documentary. For Vince McMahon being 74 years old to make Gronk look like a bitch, that's why anybody watched this shit. Vince is a boss, yo. He made Gronk look like a bitch. And then Gronk continued to look like a bitch because even after Vince did it, he still didn't do it. Like, bro, what the fuck? He already made the jump. It's a bit the size of that goddamn crash bag. Did you see the size of that crash bag? It looked like a queen size mattress. He could have gotten thrown off of that motherfucking platform. For starters, it's a 10-foot drop. You wasn't gonna die. But he could have got thrown off that motherfucking platform, bench pressed and thrown off of it. And he still probably would have landed on that crash pad. It was a big ass crash pad, yo. There was so much space. And he was worried about falling. Gronk is a grown man. Grown man. Like, oh my God. That was so embarrassing. I would not show my face in public if I was Gronkowski after seeing an almost 80-year-old man take a tumble that I was still scared to do after he did it. Gronkowski, fuck off. But the highlight of the documentary to me, not just Vince making the fall. That was great. That was the draw to get me in. But the goddamn cherry on top was Kevin Owens getting told that his match with Chris Jericho was not good. I loved that. I don't know why, but that made me laugh so fucking hard. All right, so what happens is Kevin Owens is telling the story of WrestleMania, of him coming into the Performance Center in 2014, blah 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 blah, NXT. Then his WrestleMania moments of him wrestling Chris Jericho at WrestleMania. I forget which one it was. I don't even know. But Jericho is really bitter about this, by the way. So Jericho has been considerably bitter since that match got bumped to being the third match on WrestleMania, because he said he was told that it was going to be the main event, that it was going to be Jericho Owens for the Universal title. Then of course Goldberg shows back up. Goldberg beats Owens for the title. Goldberg is going to wrestle for I forget. I think Brock. I think he wrestled Brock. And Owens and Jericho end up wrestling for the U.S. title in the third match. And Chris Jericho was exceptionally mad about this. He thought that Vince McMahon was devaluing him. And, Kevin Owens, after the match, he comes to the back and he asks Vince, was it good? And Vince says no. And Jericho and Kevin Owens is just oh man. See, if I was if I was like to live, if I was like, a kind of a more competent YouTuber and I could have live streamed myself watching it, I probably would have been bored up until that part. And then I saw that part and I was like, oh my God. I was literally on the floor laughing. I rewinded it to see the disappointment in Kevin Owens when he got told no. Like, your match sucked. No, it wasn't good. And everybody just kind of looked at him, and I was like, oh, the cringe is so real. Oh my God. I haven't watched that match either, so I don't know if it was that bad. And I really want to know why Vince thought it was that bad. I do want to know. I want to know what Vince hated so much about that match. He told that man to his face that his match sucked. Well, look, man. If you got to know that your match is trash from the boss, you don't want to hear it secondary. right? That's the one thing I gotta respect. I walked out of this documentary with a tremendous amount of respect for Vince. One, he told this guy he sucked to his face. Two, he took a bump that he didn't need to take at almost 80 years old because this other fit athlete was scared to fall on the fucking crash pad. Like these people, like Vince is like surrounded by incompetent idiots at all times. And you have to be like, what is going on? Like, what really is going on? That you and I'm like, why? Just why? It was so stupid. But I do want to know, and maybe one day Kevin Owens will share with us the story of why Vince McMahon hated that match so much. Or maybe Chris Jericho will share the story. Maybe it's already out there and I should look and see. Matter of fact, let's do that right now. All right, having looked up this interview Chris Jericho did with Inside the Ropes, and it seems that Vince McMahon's main problem was that Kevin Owens had been built up to be a specific sort of destructive, badass heel, sort of a violent heel, and he worked the match doing high flying spots and frog splashes and stuff like that. And I guess in an attempt to pop the crowd, and he did not work the match like a heel, essentially. And so Vince told him it was the worst match in WrestleMania history and really just dogged him out. Wow. Oh, wow. Whew. And then Jericho said he never heard about it. So apparently Vince, because I guess Vince was unhappy with Kevin Owens' performance. So he told Kevin Owens he was not happy with Kevin Owens' performance. Shit on Kevin Owens. Told him to get his shit together and that he needed to lose weight. And then told him that he needed to learn how to work like a heel, apparently. That's people who've been to the indies, man. They think that, again, people think that it's all about popping the crowd. Like, you're a heel, dude. Work like a heel. And I haven't seen that match in forever. But worst match in WrestleMania history, oh no, that's not possible. That's not at the same event that had Undertaker and El Gigante, Giant Gonzalez. No, that's one of the worst matches in history. Undertaker and not Bam Bam Bigelow. Undertaker and Big Boss Man, the Hell in a Cell match. That's one of the worst matches in history. Jericho, it was even said that he think that the match was good, but he didn't think it lived up to the hype. And well, I can say that I didn't even remember the match that well, so I'm not going to cape for it. So, I mean, it is what it is. But Vince telling that man his match wasn't good made my fucking day. You can't. I wish I could bottle how I felt about when I heard that and sell it. It'd be worth more money than I have in my bank account right now. It's amazing. Especially because I don't like Kevin Owens, so it made it so much better. Because I was like, oh, so somebody else sees that Kevin Owens is the drizzling shits, right? But Kevin Owens isn't bad. He's just not. He's just one of those guys like the internet really like to blow him out of proportion and say he was the next big thing. He was going to be the greatest guy ever, and he ended up being a really okay guy. And I think that he was really good in NXT because they kind of found the right fit for the character as a vicious, violent heel. And I think that's really what everybody wants. But Kevin Owens kind of does want to be liked and wants to be endearing. And he doesn't really want to go full. And I used to call him Bubba Ray Owens because he's chubby, like Bubba Ray Dudley. I used to call him Bam Bam Owens. I wish I need to go back to doing that, calling him Bam Bam Owens and Bubba Ray Owens. But I really don't care that much about Kevin Owens to make fun of him anymore. But because he really has been downplayed the last couple of years. But he did, and I will say this, because this needs to be said, as hard as I am on Kevin Owens, I fucking loved his match with Seth Rollins at WrestleMania 36. The Pandemic Mania, his match with Seth Rollins was fucking good. And I think it was probably the best match on the show, if we're being honest. Outside of the cinematic matches, I think his story was Seth Rollins, and then the match that they had was the best, some of the best shit they had on the show. And I count the Orton Edge match as a cinematic match because it was a pastiche of, who knows how long it was put together. But I think he bounced back and he did. And Kevin Owens had a really rocky road in the WWE because he wasn't even on WrestleMania 35, and then 36 was in front of no crowd. But Kevin Owens is a guy, man. I think he's earned my respect. But so that's one of the reasons why I stopped calling him Bubba Ray Owens. But he can, him being a stooge is something I'm not a fan of that. And if you don't know what I mean he's the guy who was is the reason why they all had to wear masks behind plexiglass and for all that time, because he was going to go home if they didn't. And so he had Vince McMahon implement this fine system, and it's fucking trash, man. It's fucking stupid. But one thing, other than those two things, I really had nothing else to talk about coming out of this documentary. But one more thing, since I'm looking at my notes, I took copious notes, and I've only wanted to talk about two things. Was that Braun Strowman actually met Mark Henry at a strongman competition in 2012, and Mark Henry was instrumental in bringing Braun Strowman into the WWE, which I think is fucking cool. You know, I think that that's some really cool stuff. And Braun Strowman's road to WrestleMania 36, winning the Universal title, was actually quite cool as well. He was driving up to the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin, 20 hours away. And then they found out Roman was going to pull out. And so they called Braun on the phone and was like, "We're sending a plane to get you. We need you to do something." He gets on the plane, flies all the way back to Florida just to find out you're working with Goldberg. That was great. And he cried a lot. He talked about being a fat kid that got bullied, and that's why he wanted to lifting and all that type of stuff. And yeah, man, getting bullied will motivate you. Now we live in a world where, you know, you get bullied, you don't respond, you tattletale, you tell on somebody, and you know, you get that person changed. You don't change yourself, you change. You get that person changed. You get that person punished for making fun of you. But we see that, you know, sometimes getting made fun of can getting made. He wouldn't be who he is if he hadn't gotten made fun of. And that's just kind of how it is, man. But I think that was a pretty cool story too. That, you know, in the clinch, they called Braun Strowman and knew they could trust him to show up, and he was believable in that spot as a guy who could beat Goldberg. And you know, that was good. I like that. As a documentary, it was okay. I think that there was a lot of course, pieces missing, but of course there was also, you know, because Bray Wyatt wasn't involved, and John Cena talked about it took 7.5 hours to shoot the Firefly Funhouse match, and he wasn't even in the documentary that much. Edge wasn't in it at all. But they basically just talked about all the new people taking their chances. You know, Rhea Ripley, you know, of course, my dream, and you know, her reaction to wrestling Charlotte and how she looked up to Charlotte and all that type of stuff. You know, Drew McIntyre, his disappointment of not being able to get the moment in front of everybody. But he said, like, it was a very unique moment, something that where he got to get crowned in front of nobody, but he also got to share that moment with more people who was watching, because there was really nothing else going on in the world, because the world had pretty much stopped. So pretty much everybody's watching WrestleMania. And maybe more people was probably watching then that might have watched if it was like a normal year. Because if it was a normal year, WrestleMania would have been one night. You know, it would have been just normal, one long show. And people would have complained that it was one long show. And, you know, maybe, you know, and I've seen that people like Meltzer and stuff like that has tried to play it off like it was a bad thing that they put the title on them during the pandemic. And that spin, that is an amazing spin, man. Like Brock is going to keep showing up. Like, for starters, what are you going to do? You're going to bring Brock and Drew onto the show and then say, well, we can't crown you in an empty arena. So we're going to have Brock beat you, and then Brock's going to go home for who knows how long. I mean, think about that for a minute. Just think about how people try to act like this is a negative, that Drew McIntyre, for starters, they act like Drew McIntyre is the reason why there were no people in the crowd. There was a global pandemic that took place. But it's also a bigger responsibility as far as Braun and Bray, not Braun and Bray, but yeah, Braun, Bray, Drew, and Rhea, and all these people, Charlotte and all them. Sasha, Becky, Bailey, everybody who's sort of been the MVPs of the pandemic era of WWE, the 2020 era. They are the horses during a very unique time. Like I said in previous documentaries, you talking about in the previous videos, you talking about a year where usually people are loath to go off and disappear for long periods of time. But Roman Reigns was gone for months. Charlotte has been gone for months. Becky went off and got pregnant because it's the pandemic. Nothing matters, right? Nothing. And you even have people who are fans of the business who say, well, it doesn't feel like, and Kevin Owens talked about this in the documentary. People were disrespecting it, saying it's not really WrestleMania because there's not a lot of people, not a big show. And there was a lot of that stuff going around at the time. Like I said, there's people talking about need to be pushed back till August, and here it is August, and there's still no people. There was people shitting on the idea. There's wrestling journalists who are trying to spin it as a bad thing that a guy won a title in the middle of nowhere. But it's also saying at the same time a bad thing that, it's kind of crazy, right? Because nobody said that when Keith Lee won the NXT title and there were no people in the crowd. Nobody said, well, you don't want to crown a guy in the middle of nowhere and then with no fans. It's like nobody cared when Keith Lee won. Nobody cared when Cody won the TNT title in front of no crowd. Nobody cared. Why is it? It just seems to be a spin, this negative spin we have to put on everything because it's WWE and because, it's just stupid, man. It's just stupid. But ultimately, I give them a lot of credit for being the thoroughbreds. Even if you don't like Drew McIntyre or you don't like Braun Strowman, you got to give the dudes credit for being willing to put the shows on their back and going out there and in empty arenas, not getting the huge reactions and being the guys who have to try to draw when there is no crowd because everyone else went home. Brock went home, Goldberg went home, Roman went home, Becky went home, Charlotte went home. They didn't go home. They stuck around and they tried to tough it out, So I got to give them credit just for that. But two things made me watch this documentary, and I'm very petty because I did watch the entire hour documentary, and I walked away with Vince made Gronk look like a bitch, and then Vince made Kevin Owens look like a bitch. Great stuff, top notch. The House of McMahon, as far as making people look stupid, never fails. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later.